Welcome into your day 3 of Media Days CRAZE here in Dallas as the SEC continues to take over. Texas, Mississippi State, Alabama, and Florida all here on day 3 and taking the podium. I am actually joined now by AP Stidham, the producer of Wishbone Boys, and we are going to talk all about the SEC. You got a crazy travel schedule this year. We definitely want to talk about Alabama because we heard from Kalen DeBoer for the first time. But how's today going? How are you enjoying SEC Media Days?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show,
Yeah.
Bill. Really appreciate it. Yeah, you know, this is a welcome to Kalen DeBoer and Jeff Levy, some of the newer coaches in the league. And the first thing people always ask me about, well, what about this new coach at Alabama? I said, well, if you don't know anything about him, he beat Texas twice. Alabama could beat Texas twice. And he beat him in Texas and in New Orleans, which is next to Texas. So he beat Oregon 3 times with Bo Nix. So that's pretty spectacular.
Well, and not only that, I mean, if you think about it, too, he's no slouch as a head coach. He's won 104 games out of 116 as a head coach. What do you see? You know, we can look at a lot of head coaches and look at the qualities they bring, whether they're like a Lane Kiffin, who's just charismatic as can come for Ole Miss, or someone like Kirby who just preaches accountability. What do you see from a guy like Kalen DeBoer?
Yeah, he kind of is a breath of fresh air. Nick Saban was more regimented in his philosophy with practices, and I mean, Kalen DeBoer plays the music, but Kalen DeBoer is doing it a different way, but very successful, as you stated. So I think the players have really embraced him because there's a little bit of release of pressure, but you're looking for performance and production at all times. And he's been able to continue that national trend of Alabama finding players everywhere in every state. You know, that was, I'll give you an example. Nick Saban, when he was at Alabama, after Coach Bryant left in 1982, Alabama could not get a player out of Louisiana. They couldn't steal a player. They couldn't hide him away. But it took Nick Saban to come to Alabama where they started to recruit in Louisiana, and then they made that brand nationwide. Roll Tide.
Yeah, absolutely they did. What do you believe will be DeBoer's hardest challenge going into this first year, not only in the SEC, but taking over for arguably the greatest coach of all time? Yeah,
I think he's going to hear a lot of second guessing if something goes wrong. But I would say, coming from Washington, they played sufficient defense. They won a lot of games. They were in the championship game, but I think maybe a little bit better defense we're going to see with Kane Womack coming on board. You know, he left the University of South Alabama as a head coach. So I think a little bit better defense. I think offensively, he's very good, right? He does well as long as he has his quarterback. He had Michael Penix Jr., and so he did well. He had his quarterback, and they won a lot of games. And I think Jalen, we're looking for him. He throws the deep ball, but can he be precise in the short passes and the intermediate and be timely? Because last year, we're looking for big numbers, but we're not looking for 49 sacks like last year.
Correct. And definitely not. And, you know, before we transition to talking about Jalen Milroe, because I definitely want to talk about him, when it comes to DeBoer, how high do you feel like his confidence is? Because to take over for Nick Saban, you can't second guess yourself. And when you come in and you're trying to earn the trust and leadership of not only the guys in the locker room, but your staff and other people who are used to winning, you have to be sound in the decisions you're making. Yeah.
He's nothing but a winner. So why would he think otherwise? He's coming to Alabama where they have, as they say, all the resources. You know, we know Texas A&M's been saying that, but they haven't had a championship since '39 in Texas. And I've watched Texas many, many years, one of my favorite teams, but I always use this phrase, and I keep it real. AP keeps it real. They do the least with the most. You know, who should have all the championships, Alabama or Texas? Texas should have all the championships, but Alabama has continued through the decades. They're the only team that could say the 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 90s in this century has all these championships. I mean, they surpassed Notre Dame as the national brand. It used to be Alabama was maybe chasing Notre Dame to be the national brand. I think Notre Dame's chasing Alabama now.
When you look at a guy like Jalen Milroe, it seems people, because of everything that he was able to do last year and, you know, make it to the college football playoff, but now looking at this season, it's, okay, he has the ability to be a Heisman contender.
Yes, he does.
Is that what you see in him?
I think so, because he's playing in a winning program. He brought his team to the semifinals last year. He made that big play against Auburn. I call it an excellent football play. Some people say miracle, but really it was a 4th and 31. The receiver was one-on-one coverage. He leaped, brought his feet in bounds, made the reception in the last minute of the game. But so he had those dramatic moments. And when you look at him athletically, he's, I don't know, 230 pounds. He's maybe the fastest player in the team. He's hard to, even if you're in the backfield, I mean, it's hard to get him on the ground, but he was sacked 49 times. So he's got to make that dramatic step, I think, in the passing game because you know he can run.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at this Crimson Tide team, where do you see might be their weakness this upcoming season?
I always look at the two units, the offensive line, and I say 49 sacks. That number is big in my mind. You know?
Yeah,
but
it is.
It's like a chorus line. You must be in step. And then you look at the defensive backfield. That's the last line of defense. Now, they have some talent, but it's inexperienced, and you're trying to be like that chorus line in step. So can they get there fast enough with this new defensive scheme and know each other? Because when you play a tight ball game, one touchdown, I thought you had them, you had them in open receiver for a touchdown. So can that defensive backfield come together quickly? Because you're going to Wisconsin, Tyler Van Dyke, the transfer from Miami, from Glastonbury, Connecticut. You're on the road, and Wisconsin's a tough place to play. And they have a good coach, Luke Fickle. I was always impressed with him. I try to anticipate every year and check out different teams. I was able to watch Cincinnati the year they went to the playoffs. I said, let me go to see Cincinnati play because I'd like to see people in person up close.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I want to take our scope and come out a little bit.
Yes.
What do you believe should be Nick Saban's role outside of being a head coach? We see him here. He's doing a lot of media, but there's been talks that, he can use his voice in a way that he's able, I don't want to say manipulate things, but put an impact on it as far as maybe NIL goes and recruiting. What do you see his role now that he's hung up the whistle?
Yeah, he could be that voice. He's always been the voice, right?
Yeah,
the last,
absolutely.
I don't know, decade plus, right? When he, because he evolved as a coach himself. But in college football, it seems that there's always a king, and they listen to the king. So if he was really studious about all the different issues, he could come out with a platform and say, I believe in this, and really emphasize it and galvanize people to move forward. But we know that the NCAA is a political machine, and we realize that sometimes it takes a lot to get something done, even if you're the king.
Absolutely.
You're a king in the college football world, but you're just a piece.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's different. He doesn't command everything to happen.
What do you make of this new SEC? 16 teams, no divisions.
Yeah.
It feels different.
Yes, Texas and Oklahoma are the Blue Bloods. I consider Blue Bloods the top 10 all-time winners. They have the big brand. You look at Oklahoma, not a big state, but a big brand. Texas, big state and big brand. So I don't know if you could have taken too many teams and then geographically it's attached to the SEC states. So it was perfect. And they're looking to compete at the highest level. Texas has a big budget, can spend a lot of money. Oklahoma, you turn up the oil well just 10 more minutes and you got enough money to compete anywhere. And they have Heisman Trophy winners, national championships, conference championships. Texas, they have those as well. So I think there were two excellent additions to the conference, and it'll be fun for the SEC people to travel to Texas and Oklahoma, new stadiums.
It definitely will. Add a little pizzazz. All the players have definitely been talking about going to Norman and playing in Gaylord, and obviously in Austin. Austin's a fun town. I know a game everyone has circled is that matchup with Georgia in October. It's actually going to be a wild weekend. Being in Atlanta, we've already booked our travel. The hotels alone were $2,000 because it's also a Formula One race for the Circuits of America there. So it is going to be a packed weekend in Austin. You brought up Heisman. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and plus they're rivals. Texas and Oklahoma, they're rivals, so you brought them along.
You bring both of them, and they get the Red River rivalry.
Yeah.
I don't think SEC people are going to be aware of what that entails with the Texas State Fair.
Right.
It is going to be a whole nother level of turkey legs, fried Oreos, all that good stuff at the Cotton Bowl there. So, but you brought up Heisman, and you're a Heisman voter.
Right.
Who are you eyeing as some Heisman favorites this year?
Yeah, you're always looking at the quarterbacks, and I'd like to check out wide receivers, running backs, anybody that.
But the reality is it's a quarterback.
It's mostly quarterbacks because the running backs don't get the ball as much now, right? You're looking at Milroe, you're looking at Quinn Ewers. Trying to think of another.
Carson Beck.
Carson Beck, of course. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Carson Beck. And I'm trying to think of anybody else within the conference.
Jackson Dart? Are you a Jackson Dart believer?
Jackson Dart. This is an interesting thing about Ole Miss. Okay. Lane Kiffin, I think he has to prove himself because he falters against those top echelon teams. I mean, he did beat LSU last year, but we know LSU, like I said, they can't spell defense. You know, so but he did win that game. But they're the Penn State of the Southeast, and Penn State's the Ole Miss of the Big Ten. They both can't beat Ohio State, Michigan, or Georgia, Alabama. So, but Jackson Dart, yeah, if Ole Miss has a big season, absolutely, you have to consider him. Yeah.
What would you say is your hottest SEC take right now?
I would say that everyone's chasing Georgia, and it's wide open. You know, you have maybe Texas in there. Do they have the defense up front that can succeed again? Because I think that's what turned the tide for Texas, where they had a little bit better defense toughness.
Yeah.
Because Texas was soft for so many years.
They were. You know, what bothered me about Texas, and maybe people who didn't pay attention to the Big 12 enough, it was always, every year it was like, Texas is a powerhouse. Texas is going to win the Big 12. And then they're nowhere to be found, and they're not strong.
No.
And what irked me a little bit, and maybe this is just, I'm a Big 12 girl. I played soccer at Oklahoma State, so forgive me. But I look at the preseason rankings for the SEC, and it's Georgia, Texas, Alabama.
Right.
Do you really believe? And yes, they had a great year last year. Quinn Ewers was very strong, a very stout defense, an explosive run game. But that's 1 year.
He's won 10 games one time, Steve Sarkisian. I bring that fact up. One time. He coached
and
about
I don't
10
think
years,
he's going to get it his year 4 here in the SEC now.
Yeah, it's a tougher conference overall, but like I said, he's going to have a good offense. He has some transfers. Isaiah Bond went from Alabama to Texas. So, yeah, people have a lot of respect for Texas, but I'm of the sort that says, let's wait and see. He won 10 games last year, and he couldn't make it to the championship with a very good team. Kalen DeBoer beat him.
And kind of to go hand in hand with that, talking about Alabama, when you look at them, you know, everyone's, the storyline everyone's talking about is how are they going to fare now that Saban's not there and Kalen DeBoer takes over.
Yes.
But I think what people lack to see is the foundation.
Yes.
The foundation of years on years and years that is there, that has set them up, that as long as you keep the train on tracks, you can remain a powerhouse without Nick Saban.
Oh, yeah. You know, Alabama's a place where bad coaches have won 10 games. Think about that. Steve Sarkisian, considered one of the top coaches making all this money, has done it once. At Alabama, they've had bad coaches at succession win 10 games. So you can win at Alabama. Okay, that's proven. It's not me saying it, not you saying it.
No.
There's the numbers.
That is the truth. Tell me about your travel schedule this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You were telling me about it, and I'm tired already.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention my show, AP and Kelly, As We See It, Capital SEC, Southeastern Conference. So we cover the SEC and outside as well. So my first game will be LSU at USC in Las Vegas. And then we'll be back to Alabama for the California versus Auburn game. I was in Berkeley last year.
Okay.
Then the next week will be Ole Miss, Wake Forest. The following week will be UCLA versus LSU. And that's a strange thing, right? USC and UCLA on LSU's schedule the same year. The only team I could find, and I haven't did the deep dive, but Notre Dame, that happened one time because they play USC every year, right?
Okay,
and they put UCLA on schedule. And then I think I'll be back for Oklahoma at Auburn. And then my 2 non-conference games will be Iowa at Ohio State. I always try to check out potential playoff teams, and then I'll look at Stanford versus Notre Dame the following week. Then I'll be back south somewhere, maybe Alabama, Tennessee, something like that.
Wow.
And after that, I'll be LSU, Alabama, maybe go to the Oklahoma-Alabama game out there, and then maybe Oklahoma at LSU at the end of the year.
Okay.
So 14 straight weeks, and I'm trying to do Army versus Navy for the first time.
Oh, that will be fun. That will be fun. Yeah, that's a packed schedule. AP, thank you for joining me and talking a little bit about the SEC. We've enjoyed having you on. We're going to take a short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive into SEC talk, we have to talk about something much, much bigger, and that is the age that Doc Holliday turned just yesterday. Happy 51st.
Yeah, you know what, looking at it and hearing it sounds good. Appreciate it. God is good. That's all I can say.
Age is nothing but a number.
It is.
You ooze youth.
Appreciate it.
You
God, it's all
keeping up
good.
with the kids.
Yeah, trying. No, I was in bed yesterday.
Did you do anything for your birthday, though?
Yeah, I FaceTime my wife, my children, my daughters called me from Italy, one of them, and sang me happy birthday. And yeah.
You should be in Italy, not here.
I know. I got to help pay for all of that, so that's why I'm here. But thank you. Appreciate it.
Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do it. Casey's here to join us and talk a little bit about Mississippi State. Before we dive into specifics, tell us some of the storylines that are going on with the Bulldogs.
As of right now, of course, we're jumping into that Levy era, so it's all about the newness, what's coming into Mississippi State. We've got our new quarterback coming in as well, Blake Shapen, so that's also going to be new. And also looking at that defense for Mississippi State because, a new defensive coordinator as well. So what is it going to look like for the Bulldogs? What is this fresh start going to look like for them? I'm excited. Jeff Levy's always talking about some showtime, so we're going to have a showtime with them.
We're going to see how that showtime goes. I'm curious from the vibes you've been around, when you've been around Levy, what is the vibe? What does he preach? What do you feel like his core values as a head coach are?
Well, just hearing him speak, he's very player-oriented. I will say that. It's not just about what's going on the field, but also what's going on with his players off the field as well. When you get into that coaching, he's a very I guess I can say I don't want to say strict, but very detail-oriented, I'll say that. He wants the little things to go right. He wants the little things to, go right with his team, with the offense. When you talk about the offense, it's an explosive offense when it comes to that. He wants to see that power. He wants to see a lot of things go correctly and just move together as one when he expresses with his team.
Doc, when you see a new program, get a new head coach, trying to get things on the straight away, what are the things you want to see to be like, okay, we're headed in the right direction?
Well, what Levy has to do right now, he has to come in and set the tone about what he wants and his expectations, because I think they got like 2 starters coming back. That's like he's losing almost everybody. So good luck to you, my guy, because you're playing in the SEC and you brand new. But he had a lot of success at Oklahoma. But I think taking over a program like Mississippi State, you can get a lot of good recruits out there. But when you're coming in, you want to set the expectations and the tone of how you expect them to work, how you expect them to practice, how you expect them to carry themselves on and off the field. So I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing. So that's the first thing and foremost he needs to concentrate on.
From an offensive perspective, obviously OC at Oklahoma, they've done some really good things over the years. How has he been able to take his time at OU as an OC and evolve that for this Mississippi State offense?
He talked a lot about, and even the players talked about taking that OU offense and bringing it into Mississippi State, and he's just kind of making that merger. But like I said before, he's making sure that it's explosive. He wants it to be very dominant. And honestly, I feel like that's going to be the key point for Mississippi State coming into this year is just what is that offense going to look like? Are they going to be able to gel as well? And we talked about, like you were just saying, the newcomers, everybody's new. They've all got to gel as well. Blake Shapen, that offensive line, it's all got to merge into one. But just hearing him talk earlier about just making sure all the boys are on the same page and making sure that they're one, that's going to be really effective coming to this season.
And what do we see from quarterback Blake Shapen at this point?
I personally, after the spring game, he just looked so comfortable in Jeff Levy's offense. It just looked like he was very comfortable with what he was doing. He flowed really well, delivered really well, and I just feel like coming into this season, he's definitely going to surprise some people. I feel like people shouldn't be doubting Mississippi State's offense. I feel like they are.
Both of us look at each other and are like, this will lead perfectly into my next question. What are the realistic expectations for Mississippi State? I want to answer from both of you.
Now let Casey go ahead.
We want the positive Patty to go
singing
first.
that song for him right now.
Realistically, of course, they're new coach, new everything. So I'm not going to sit here and say the most winningest season ever. It's going to be, tip top. But I do feel like they're going to give some people a little bit of a challenge. I don't think they're going to get blown out of the water anywhere. I definitely feel like it's going to be an offense that, as this season progresses, they're going to get better. And I feel like when we see that on the field, like it's gonna definitely we're just gonna see it as they get better. It's gonna show on those stats. So.
Doc,
She's so optimistic. I just love the optimism. What I expect Mississippi State to do, game one, is to put 11 people on offense and 11 on defense. That's what I expect. Now, season-wide, a lot of people have them picked to finish next to last, right above Vanderbilt. So
yeah, they're sitting at 15th in preseason polls, which isn't great. Now, to be fair, this is their schedule. They have to go to Arizona State at some point. They host Florida. They're at Texas. They're at Georgia in back-to-back weeks, or well, there's a bye week in there, but back-to-back weeks essentially. Texas A&M, Arkansas, UMass, at Tennessee, Mizzou, and at Ole Miss. I mean, their road schedule is brutal.
I feel like they have the toughest road schedule out of everybody in the
I
country.
don't know. There's a few. Florida's schedule's
that's true.
gnarly. Georgia has a hard schedule. People just overlook it because they're Georgia, so they're
Yeah,
like, oh, they can handle it.
fine.
But still, let's not forget that is a very hard
Yeah.
schedule. Are there any of these games that you're looking at and saying, oh, I can't wait for this one, or this is going to be a fun matchup?
Oh, I feel like I can't just overlook the Egg Bowl. Like, that's the iconic game that everybody always looks forward to. But especially since it's going to be Mississippi State going to Ole Miss, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough one. I'm very excited because you know what they say about bowl games like that. You know, you never know. You never know what can happen. But in a rivalry game, that one's going to be exciting.
How do we compare the demeanor of Lebby to Lane Kiffin?
Coaching standpoint or just like personality?
Personality. I don't even care about coaching right now.
Personality-wise, I will say Lane Kiffin is very much like kind of laid back, kind of like I won't say to himself, but kind of like, you know, a little softer. Lebby is very much more of a, hey, I'm here, I want you to know I'm here, and I'm excited to be here. That's just the vibes that I get talking to them today and yesterday and things like that, which I feel like also kind of pours into how they coach a little bit. But just personality-wise, they're kind of different.
Doc, I'll give you the not positive Patty question.
Oh.
Are you more of a believer in Mississippi State or Vanderbilt?
Oh, Mississippi State, whatever. I never count Vanderbilt. Even when I'm having
Have you
SEC
talked Vanderbilt a lot this week?
No, I
Do you think
never.
anyone
I haven't even thought about them. To tell you the truth,
I
with
was about
Texas
to
and
say.
Oklahoma coming in, I forgot Vanderbilt was a part of the SEC.
Oh, my gosh.
Vanderbilt fans, I know y'all probably upset,
Brutal.
but
They're
you all
coming
are.
back.
They're
They're coming
academic.
for you.
They're an academic school. So if they do come for me, send me a lawsuit or something. But no, Mississippi State, of course, because one thing about it, I played football at Memphis, but Mississippi State, even the atmosphere and the people down there, that's the best stadium and atmosphere I ever played in high school, college, on any professional level. So it's tough to go down there and play. Now, I can talk about Mississippi State and the struggles, but that's a tough place to play when you go out there. But I have way more expectations for Mississippi State than I do for Vandy.
What do we think of the cowbells? Are we pro cowbells? Some of the players were talking about it, and they're like, my freshman year, it was daunting. I was not used to it. Now I'm just like, it's
being
nothing.
in that stadium, it is definitely something you have to get used to. I will say that. Just covering all the games, it is something you have to get used to. And I think I have to kind of reset every time I go there. It is loud, but I love the energy. I'm here for the fan atmosphere. So I like them. I'm pro cowbell.
I used to love playing. I mean, I used to like to turn around and tell them, shh.
You quiet your cowbell.
But no, that's a part of the atmosphere, and that's a part of the tradition down there, Mississippi State and Stark Vegas is what I call it. So I'm glad. I hope they keep banging the cowbells.
What are some of y'all's favorite college football traditions as far as atmosphere goes at stadiums around the nation?
Oh, so both my parents went to Auburn.
Okay.
My dad played football, and my mom was a gymnast. So born and raised in like the Auburn athletics atmosphere. The eagle flying around in the beginning of the game will never get old to me. I will forever love that.
I love that for you.
Well, I'm a Memphis Tiger. It's the Tiger Walk. You know, you go from when you get dropped off at the Liberty Bowl, you go from the parking lot through all the Memphis Tiger fans with the fight song and the cheerleaders. So, of course, you know, I got to shout my Memphis Tiger tradition.
I guess
out,
I'll stick with tradition. I went to Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
There's a few I love. We have Bullet, who comes out after a touchdown and rides on the turf, and love that. Pistol Pete will shoot a shotgun, and everyone knows to go OSU. But we also have our paddle people that bang up against the side of the stadium, and they're right on top of the players, so it's so loud, and all the players like complain about it. They're like, they're so close to us. But I actually have my own paddle because athletes, on your senior night, the paddle people will show up no matter what sport and present you with your own paddle.
Wow.
So I think that's very, very cool.
You all are physical down
I was about to
there.
say,
Listen.
I love it, though. I love it. I love it.
You
Yeah.
got to rock, go Pokes, right? All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about one team that maybe people are overlooking a little bit in the SEC. Stick with us. Welcome back to your Media Days Craze. I am now joined by Jake. He covers Alabama in depth, so we're going to get into that. I want to talk about Kalen DeBoer at the big podium for a second. He was asked about, the players that have been there and been in the foundation of what the Tide really is and what he has learned from him. What did you take away from his answer? Because he kind of said, it's new grounds for everyone, but at the same time, he can learn a lot from his players.
I found it to be an interesting parallel because it's something actually DeBoer talked about when he was first hired. When he met the team for the first time, he said, hey, let's do this together. And he was talking about the postseason. Because obviously, if you remember, he coached Washington to a national title game, and Alabama was right there before punching their ticket to the national title game. And he said, hey, let's go through this together. We know what it feels like to fall short in the postseason. Why not? And so I feel like, alluding to what you mentioned earlier, there's that common ground where they have that understanding of falling short, that let's do this together. I know there's things that Saban did, and there's things that I like to do too, but let's work together, and I feel like the players have fully bought into that.
Well, and it was interesting because Jalen Milroe was talking in the electronic media room, and to that note specifically, he was like, you kind of have a bond if we both got so close and fell so short that you realize you have the same goal. What is the realistic expectation for Alabama this season?
I know that's like the overarching question, right? And I know a lot of people were talking about where there would be a drop-off with Alabama. I would like to think there won't be. I mean, obviously they have Georgia, but it's in Tuscaloosa, so that's in their favor. But I feel like Alabama has a real shot to get back to the SEC title game, and then from there control their own destiny. And of course, with the 12-team playoff now, anything is possible. But I like to think Alabama won't have much of a drop-off. The one question I do have with Alabama right now is probably the defense and the secondary. I think offensively they will be fine. You think about Coach Kalen DeBoer, an offensive-minded guy, Nick Sheridan calling the plays there. And you think about Jalen Milroe, I mean, this is the third guy he's going to have calling plays for him. He had Tommy Rees, a little bit with Bill O'Brien a little bit, and now he has Nick Sheridan and Coach Kalen DeBoer. So a lot of new things, but I feel like Alabama, there won't be much drop-off.
You brought up the defense. When you look at, Saban retires, which first of all, let's just stop there. What was that like for you in Tuscaloosa when you heard, the news that could be the biggest news in college football is coming down?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I got here 2 years ago this July, and never would I have imagined I'd be covering Nick Saban in his final 2 seasons. But I think once we got toward the end there, I wouldn't say that we knew, but maybe there were some signs where you kind of got to feel that maybe he was getting closer to the end, and there were probably some things. I mean, that's NIL, that's a whole conversation for another day, but I feel like he was getting closer to the end. But when the news broke, I mean, it just flipped everything upside down. I mean, I was actually, I remember that day exactly. I was working on a feature story, and all of a sudden I get a phone call saying, hey, you got to go to Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban he's done. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then, then craziness ensued, and here we are now.
And you brought up the defense, and there were so many transfers after. You kind of just saw this trickle. I'm sure Alabama's going, oh no, what are we going to do? But I think the biggest one was Caleb Downs. Well, how big of a loss is
People thought he was going to go to Georgia for a second there. But, it is a big loss. I mean, he was a star as a freshman. I mean, I remember going to the games, just watching him play, especially that SEC title game. I mean, absolute stud. And even I remember after the game on the field, Kirby Smart was, dabbing him up. Obviously, they have that bond there when he tried to recruit him to come to Georgia. So I feel like he is an immensely talented player. So that is a huge loss for them there.
Well, side note, that is very interesting. Caleb Downs' mother was my math teacher in high school. So shout out to Miss Downs. She used to let me come in late all the time as long as I brought her a chicken biscuit. So use that as a note that if you ever need to get to class late, make sure you just come with a chicken biscuit.
There we go.
But no, it's interesting to talk about Georgia and Alabama because when you look at the SEC, to me, those are the 2 teams to beat. People still want to throw Texas up there, but I'm not totally convinced at the moment until they can come into the SEC and win some big-time games. But Kalen DeBoer will get a massive test. Week 5, Bryant-Denny Stadium, Georgia comes in his first ever SEC game. What do you think that week will be like for him? Because it is going to be a whole nother spectacle when you think about TV coverage, that game in general, and just what he's going to feel before kickoff.
Yeah, I feel like you don't need to tell him twice what to expect. I mean, he's been hearing it for, the past 6 months now, replacing Nick Saban. He gets asked his questions all the time. But, of course, it's going to hit different when you step onto the field for the first time in that game. But I feel like he's somebody that is well prepared for it. I mean, he's won everywhere. If you just go down his resume, obviously this is the SEC. It's the big stage, the biggest if people want to call it that. But I feel like he's going to ease right into it. But obviously the expectations are immense. You think about the fans You think about following up Nick Saban. They want to win. They don't want to drop off. They want to keep this train rolling. So obviously the pressure is going to be there, but I feel like he's somebody that has the persona to do it.
Do you believe that Nick Saban couldn't get into SEC Media Days because he didn't have his credential? Like, I know we're seeing that. He's like, I couldn't get in. And I'm like, okay, who's stopping that man, though, in this setting?
Yeah, one of us. It is remarkable, too, because I saw on social media, I think it was a Tennessee station that was just did a one-on-one with him in the hallway, and it's so cool. But I think about, like, if I tried to do that last season, they'd look at me like, who do you think you are?
You
like,
would never be allowed back there, would you?
Yeah, so it's just remarkable to see just the transition, but it seems like he's enjoying it all.
Well, it was funny because we were talking to head coach Kirby Smart, and I just asked him how different it was to see Saban in a capacity that, here he is now kind of trading in his whistle for a mic and being one of the media. He goes, yeah, I had to do a 15-minute phone call with him, and I had to talk about the team, and I felt like I was giving secrets to Darth Vader, and I just thought that was hilarious that's how he sees it now. For you, who is the top dog to beat in the SEC? Is it, in fact, Georgia?
It's got to be. It's got to be Georgia. I mean, the thing with Georgia is that Alabama, I feel like, at least Nick Saban was always a thorn in Kirby's side, it seemed like. I mean, the big games. I know they had him that one national title game, which is obviously a great feeling for Georgia. But you look at the overall record, the history between those two teams when it comes between Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. Nick Saban obviously has the upper hand. But I feel like now that he's out of the picture, I feel like this is a time for Georgia to really pull away from everybody else. But Georgia really hasn't had much of a drop-off. I mean, I know there's been some seasons they've lost more games than maybe they probably wanted to or thought they would. But Georgia, I mean, they are the top dogs.
Do you believe Carson Beck is the future Heisman winner? And do you think he is the best quarterback in college football right now? By the way, Jake went to Georgia, so if he says yes, you can call him a homer.
No bias here. Well, it's funny because as a Georgia guy, I mean, I'm pretty good about leaving the bias out of it. Obviously, when I was at the SEC title game, you saw your alma mater, die a slow death. But I feel like that's something I'm used to as a Georgia fan because when I was in school, Alabama would just take it to us every time. And so, but I feel like Georgia fans, they're just enjoying the ride. They don't know how long this is going to last. They don't know how many more years Kirby's going to do. But the door's wide open for them to really blow this thing wide open. And so I feel like they're trying to take advantage of that. And when it comes to Carson Beck, I mean, what he did last season was pretty remarkable. You think about sitting behind Stetson Bennett for a little bit and coming in, like, he is definitely in it for the Heisman. I mean, Jalen Milroe's up there too. Texas, their quarterback. I mean, there's a few guys that come to mind, but I'd say Carson Beck is right up there with anybody else. Absolutely.
I've been asking everyone who comes on to talk with us, are they fans of the 12-team playoff? Are you like? Do you like that they vamped it up? Some people are like, no, I liked 4. Some people are like, no, I feel like we could have just started at 8 and see how it goes. Do you like 12?
I think.
Oh, he's a non-believer.
I think like 6, 8 was probably a good number. Because you think about 12, I think about there's going to be some teams that you're going to start talking about load management. These teams, when they know they have it, they're going to be in no matter what. When they have enough wins, they're sitting at the top
Kirby's already talked about it.
Yeah,
Kirby was like, our preseason's going to look different because it's a longer season, and injuries are going to happen, and we got to manage that.
Absolutely. So you think, professional sports, you see load management all the time, and that was my thing when they say 12 teams. Because you think about Georgia, if they're rocking and rolling undefeated all the way until like the second or third last game of the season, they're like, why are we going to play our best guys?
It makes you wonder too. If this was last year, how more healthy is Brock Bowers?
Absolutely. And that wouldn't even be an argument last season, right? With Georgia, did they deserve to get in? It wouldn't have mattered. 12 teams.
And that's the reality is you're looking at an SEC where 4 or 5 teams could probably get in this weekend. And I think what I like about it is one loss is no longer detrimental, which you bring up Georgia in the SEC championship last year. I think that's what's to like. But I also think you're creating a little bit of room for chaos. Just when you think about the March Madness tournament, there's always the first round, some crazy things that happen. I'm curious if we see crazy things like that happen this time around.
I think you will. I don't know how common it will be. Like, I still feel like your dominant teams are still going to dominate. But I feel like there will be moments like that where you get those upsets. And obviously it's exciting for us as sports fans, but it's going to be interesting. Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here on your Media Days Craze. Stick with us. On the other side, we're going to talk all about the Oklahoma Sooners. Welcome back to your Media Days Craze, powered by Gray Television. Bailey Burmaster, and I am now joined by Eddie Radosevich of Sooner Scoop. We go back a little bit from our days in the Big 12.
It's good to reconnect with all these people
How
out here.
does it feel to be in the SEC now?
It's crazy.
Is it different? Do you actually feel a difference?
It's not different as much as it is just it's finally here. There was so long and so much of a build-up that, like, even the celebration back in Norman on July 1st was like, it was kind of anticlimactic just in terms of, this has been happening for a while, but getting here, hearing Brent talk in front of the SEC logo for kind of the first time, that was kind of cool. And then, obviously everything that's to come with the season, like scheduling, everything, all the trips, a little bit different than waking up the morning of a game and driving to Manhattan or Lawrence or anywhere like that. So it's going to be fun. I think that you look at Oklahoma's schedule, though, and it's going to be insane.
When you go back, there were always rumors that this could happen, right?
Sure.
But I felt like the day it came down, it was out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Did it feel that same in Norman?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it was the Brent Zorneman post or story from an SEC Media Day. We had just wrapped up Big 12 Media Days, and it was like, oh, God. So this is really coming. And I think that everything that kind of happened in between of all that with Lincoln Riley leaving and then Brent coming in, it's been kind of a whirlwind over the last 3 years, but at the same time, covering it's been kind of fun. And, I think obviously moving into the SEC, it's going to be different.
So I can ask you this straight up. I want to go back to the Lincoln Riley exit because Sooner fans are still sour about this.
Yes.
And you know what? Rightfully so. You have a coach that comes in and just leads really well after Bob Stoops' departure, but then out of nowhere goes to USC. Did he run from the SEC?
I mean, I think that a lot of people want to feel that he did. And I think that with what he's done over the last couple of years in Los Angeles and with all the moves that they made, moving trying to get out of the LSU game to begin this year, getting out of the Ole Miss game in the years to come, he's not helping himself. I know that. And it was so crazy. That entire 2-week build-up in that into the 21 season. We were still doing things on Zoom at the time. Yeah. So we did, like, the post-game press conference in Stillwater on Zoom. That's when, Kerry Murdoch asked him, are you going to be the head coach at Oklahoma next year? The whole thing was, like, the next 48 hours after that was kind of a
chaos.
Dream. It was insane. It was insane. And then to realize that he's gone, like, we went from doing our end-of-the-year podcast at the end of the, like, we got back from Stillwater at 5 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning after a late game. And it was like, all right, let's just do it at noon the next day. We'll get up, we'll get it done. And by 11:30, 11:45, I was about to head down to Norman. It was like, he's taking the USC job. And that was 2 hours before it came out. And so it was like, okay, we got to get ducks in a row.
Yeah,
what's this?
Everything's changing.
And the crazy thing was, like, even the guys that I work with at Scoop, they owned the site. It had been 20 years. They had never done a coaching search. Oklahoma had never gone through a coaching search.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because Bob was there, and then obviously they handed it the day that Bob retired. Lincoln took over. It was
like a seamless transition when that happened.
It was.
Before we look to the future and what Venables has done, I want you to talk about time covering the Sooners with Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley.
Yeah.
So people who don't know Eddie, he's a character, like, to say the least. And you have a lot of fun with your job. You're very knowledgeable about what you do, but you're not afraid to have fun. What is maybe your favorite interaction you've had over the years?
Me and Baker had a lot of stuff. I think that the one with Kyler went pretty viral when I asked him what size of the shirt that he wore. He asked me if I wore a 3X, and I was like, no, it's a 2X, which I'm still waiting for Baker for Kyler to send me the shirt.
What are we doing, Kyler?
It was a $5,000 shirt, Kyler. That's like pennies to you.
Yeah, what? He can't help you out?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's been a lot of, like, back and forth. And I think a bunch of the players, like, know that I like to cut up a little bit. And
well, it keeps it lighthearted.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, you're a person.
There's only so many times you can go through the doldrums of, like, the day in, day out of covering a team and asking the same GD
What's the
questions.
wildest question you've ever asked?
Ooh, I haven't asked anything, like, crazy. I asked Baker if he was going to the prom, like, for the homecoming dance. I asked Kyler a couple off-the-wall questions, but Baker, they both knew me.
Yeah.
I knew Kyler more so from, like, the baseball side of things, from covering an OU baseball team. So we kind of had a really good relationship already. So nothing, like, just crazy off the wall, I don't think.
Did you have that kind of repertoire with Lincoln, too?
Yeah, we kind of had a interesting relationship. I think he liked me, but towards the end, I don't think he liked me. He blocked me on Twitter.
Oh,
but I think that a lot of that had to do with people always included me in their very, very hateful tweets to him after he left. And I think he's just like, I need to get this guy out of my life. I'd love to see him, though. I'd love to see Link again.
So Lincoln leaves.
Yeah.
They bring in Brent Venables.
Yeah.
You have a decent enough sample size at this point.
Sure.
Are you a Venables believer or not?
I am. And, I think that what they did from year 1 to year 2 was obviously, record-wise, was incredible. Going from 6-7 to winning 10 games last year, obvious step in the right direction. Around Oklahoma, even 10-2 people are going to be upset about it.
Yeah, correct.
So I think that, moving into this next year, it's going to be really interesting to see how this whole thing's received. I think, 9-3 in the SEC would be unbelievable.
But is it good enough in Norman?
No, it's not. It's never going to be good enough. I mean, 13-0 or 12-0 and winning a national championship is what everybody wants.
Full disclosure, I'm an Oklahoma State grad. I'm a Poke. It is what it is.
There, yeah.
I'm putting it out there. But from an outside view, especially under Venables' reigns, it does look like, and I don't want to say a step back. I feel like that's even aggressive.
Sure.
But where the standard is here, it's moved a little here.
Well, I think
just in a sense, maybe that's quarterbacks because Lincoln Riley was a guru.
Yeah.
But I feel like even if you look at the running back core at some points, they used to be a little bit stronger.
Sure.
Maybe it's just growing pains.
Sure.
But I feel like all of that is going to be even more expedited as we get into the SEC and playing here.
It's all multiplied, and I think that's why, everybody looks through the defensive side of the football now with Brent Venables and Norman. They finally got some guys that I feel like, on paper, this is one of the better defenses Oklahoma's put on the field in the last maybe 2 decades. Yeah. They're going to be pretty good, and especially with all the experience they have coming back. But at the same time, I think that there were some concerns, certainly with how Brent was running the program in that first year, and he had to make some changes. He had to make some changes with how he's running the program. I think he kind of wore him out, and I think they got to that week 7 of his first season.
Are you talking about from the coaching standpoint?
From everything. I think from getting the players in, from staying at the facility every day, from the way that they coached, from the way that they were running meetings. I think that they kind of reflected on all of that. And Brent's a big guy, and I need to look at the mirror. How can I fix this?
Yeah.
And so we saw that from year 1 to year 2. I think there's going to be more change from year 2 to year 3. And, it's going to be interesting. They're 3-7 in one-score games, and I think that's one thing that Oklahoma goes back to, or Oklahoma fans go back to, is they have to find ways to win in the fourth quarter.
You tweeted something about Venables' press conference here
and
just said it was kind of the first time he really came across as a head coach.
Yeah.
What is the difference, and why do you think that?
I think he's more comfortable. Certainly more comfortable, and which is kind of interesting coming to SEC for the first time. He's more comfortable in this setting, but I do think that he kind of grasps everything. I don't think that he has as much of a weight on his shoulders as far as what he was going through the first 2 years, and I think he's been able to delegate a lot of stuff a little bit easier, trust a lot more people, and I think that one of the big signs for Oklahoma fans, or for the Oklahoma media just in general, was him going out and hiring Zach Alley, a guy that he knows, a guy that he understands. They understand the same language of what they want to do defensively, and it's going to be interesting to see how it works out. Is he really going to be able to take a step back, take his hands off the defense, and let Zach run things? That's going to be really interesting going into the season.
On the other side of the ball, what do you make of Jackson Arnold? Do you think he's going to be able to lead OU the way they need to?
Yeah, eventually. I mean, I think he's going to be kind of the next great Oklahoma quarterback. But at the same time, he's a true freshman. And I think that he's a second-year freshman, if you will. He's going to be a sophomore.
Yeah.
He only made that one start in the Alamo Bowl last year in December. It was kind of his program for about a month. I think he's starting to get a little bit more comfortable. And just hearing him talk on Tuesday, you could tell that he is a little bit more comfortable. But at the same time, I was talking to some of the Texas guys. They said that they kind of remind him of Quinn Ewers when he was in that same stage.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So, is he he's going to go make mistakes. He's going to turn the ball over. And you just kind of got to take the good with the bad. I think the long term, the ceiling for Jackson Arnold, I would be surprised if, when it's all said and done, if he didn't get to New York City at least once.
Okay.
We'll see, though. He has the tools. He's a 5-star kid just from down the road at Denton Guyer. I mean, I think that, going to those really good programs and being around that,
definitely helps.
He got thrown into that as a freshman at Denton Guyer. It didn't go very well. And he talked about that yesterday or on Tuesday. I think that will help, but you're going into the SEC this year. It's going to be a little bit different. And how do you respond on the road? September 28th is really interesting to me. The week after they open against Tennessee, they go to Auburn for the first time. That's going to be a first road start.
Yep.
And I think that,
Auburn is not an easy place to play. I will say, I've been talking a lot in depth about this, about Carson Beck. I was kind of, last year when he came, I was like, let's see. And it took the Auburn game, I think it was week 5, him going there, and it's a close game, gritted it out, played really well, and I said, okay, he has the composure and the ability to take this team to new heights, so it's definitely going to be a game for Arnold where it's like, all right, let's see what you're made of.
Yeah, and I think that, unfortunately for him, one of the big question marks for Oklahoma on the offensive side of the ball is going to be the offensive line, is how they lost so many guys from last year. They do have a lot of guys that are returning that are experienced guys and guys that have transferred in. But at the same time, Branson Hickman's coming from SMU. I think that's going to be a little bit of a step up from what he saw week in and week out. I hate to say that in a city like Dallas, an ACC city.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's going to be a big question mark is how that offensive line plays, how that reflects on Jackson Arnold, and kind of how he navigates his first year being the guy at Oklahoma.
Have you put in a prediction for what you think the Sooners do this season?
No, I haven't. I hate predictions. If you told me they could go 9-3 right now, I'd take it, no questions asked. I think 8-4 probably a little bit more realistic. 7-5, Bailey, just pray for me. If they go 7-5, the Oklahoma fan base is not going to be happy.
No, their schedule's interesting. I feel like it goes
so
in
tough.
waves. It's Temple, Houston, Tulane, Tennessee, at Auburn, bye week, Texas, South Carolina, at Ole Miss, Maine, at Missouri, Alabama, at LSU.
It's insane.
It's
insane.
You're playing in some
It's one of the
atmospheres.
it's one of the tougher conference.
I do want to talk about the Red River rivalry, though, because do you think it's going to, as someone who's experienced the Red River rivalry, I think it's going to be a whole nother level now that it's within the SEC.
It's hard to imagine the Cotton Bowl being at a different level than it already is.
But I think it's got to be possible, right?
It might be. It's going to be so much fun. I've told everybody around here, it's like, if you have a bye week and you can get to Dallas for that weekend, it's one of the best weekends of the year.
It's
It's so
I have
unique.
Some crazy stories
Well,
that are not TV appropriate.
I have a couple from my time in school. It's a long weekend.
It is.
You're not going to do
Very
much on
hot.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every year. It'll be 82 in Oklahoma, and by the time you get down to Dallas, it's 95. Every year.
My story came because of a lot of things, but one of it was the heat, and I got super dehydrated, and I tried to leave, but then I couldn't get an Uber, so I had to climb back under a fence, and I had taken my shoes off because I was wearing, like, booties, which is a Texas thing to do, mind you.
Sure.
Just regrets, immediate regrets. Let's talk about the SEC in a bigger scope.
Yeah.
What is just different from the Big 12?
I mean, just in terms of the media day stuff, I think at the end of the day, it's the same stuff. You got your media row, you got your, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, though, it's a who's who. I mean, you can basically walk up and down Radio Row and get an interview with whomever, and it's pretty awesome in that. I think that it does feel bigger. I don't know if it's just like in the back of my brain.
Did you ever hate the SEC though?
Absolutely.
I can say this as a former Big 12 person. You're like, you guys aren't that good.
Yeah.
The thing that made me mad and still makes me mad is it was like the whole the Big 12 doesn't play defense.
Oh, sure.
And then there's blowouts in the in SEC.
What the Big 12 did though, they laid the groundwork for really good offense.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, Nick Saban was like, you know what?
Let's air it out
Maybe
too.
we should just score 50 points a game. And everybody did that. Now, it helps when you have 7 5-stars that are starting for your 11 on the defensive side of the ball. But at the same time, it does feel bigger. I know that, the grind of the SEC, I love saying that now, which I used to just absolutely roll my eyes
I
at.
need you to just look in the camera and be like, it just means
It's the
more.
grind. It just means more in this conference. It really does. And now I say that with conviction a little bit. Maybe if I don't believe it.
You're saying it a couple more times and
Yeah.
you're like, wait, am I actually starting to believe this now?
I got to tell you, it's kind of like Stockholm Syndrome a little bit, I think. I think I'm going to – my whole mindset about this conference has changed over the last year and a half.
Yeah, now it has to. It's kind
Now
of
it
hard
has
for
to,
you,
yeah.
right?
Now I carry the banner.
But now, I mean, the SEC looks different for everyone. 16
Sure.
teams, no divisions.
Sure.
And then you have the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of the 12-team playoff?
I love it. I know there's people that don't.
No, the consensus is a lot of people are like, could we start at 6 or 8?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why would we have do this?
And I think from an SEC standpoint, you go 9-3. Maybe you do go 8-4, but have 4 decent losses. You're going to be fighting to get into that 12-team playoff and going on the road possibly to play some unique atmosphere that first weekend in December or whatever it's going to be. I'm excited about it. We'll see where OU ends up. I don't know. If OU can make the playoff this year, it would obviously be a great year for Brent Venables in the program. But at the same time, I think you got to be realistic about it. You look at the schedule; it's a bear.
It makes the season longer.
Yeah.
The college game is transitioning so much more to the NFL game now, and it's like NIL and transfer portal. It's like free agency, but almost more chaotic, which is insane.
100%.
Okay, I'm going to ask you before we let you leave. Prediction for the Sooners.
Oh no, put me on it. Let's go 9-3. I'll go 9-3. I do think that this team and what they've been able to do from a recruiting standpoint, from getting guys in the portal and meeting demands that they needed.
Yep.
They've done really well. It just all has to come together.
We'll see if it does. Eddie, thanks for joining me. We're
Absolutely.
going to take a
It's good to
short break. When we come back, Dusty Dvorak's going to join me, and we're still going to talk about the Sooners because they are one of the new dogs in town. Stick with us. Welcome back to your Media Days Craze. I'm Bailey Burmaster. Everything here powered by Gray Television. I am joined now by Dusty Dvorak, SEC Network football analyst, Oklahoma grad. We're going to talk about this new look SEC.
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you make of it? Does it feel different to you?
It's exciting. Yeah, it's different. I mean, look, the Big 12 was great. I played in the Big 12, 28 years in that league. Oklahoma had a ton of success, and I have the utmost respect for a lot of the schools in that conference. But this is a little different. I mean, the SEC, it is the biggest stage in all of college football. And Oklahoma and Texas are two of the biggest brands in all of college football. That's why I think the partnership makes so much sense for both sides. Like-minded fan bases, the saying it just means more, well, it does. It means more to these fan bases. The resources that are allocated to ensure that you're good at the top of the sport year in, year out is very real. The passion and craziness, as you have Media Days Craze, there's craze with these fan bases in a good way. And I think that as SEC fan bases travel to Norman and travel to Austin, they're going to see very similar to what they see when they travel all over the SEC. I know in Oklahoma, the fan bases is so ecstatic about getting a chance to go to Auburn, about getting a chance to go to Oxford. And so it is different. It's bigger. This Media Days, it feels and is bigger, and a conference that was already dominant just got that much better, adding two of the biggest brands and great football programs in the country.
How do you evaluate the Sooners in a lot of different capacities? What do I mean by that? Well, Bob Stoops to Lincoln Riley happened so seamlessly, right? Bob Stoops was out, Lincoln Riley was in. Lincoln's exit, Sooner fans still sour about it, right? But then
I think it's a little different now.
Is it?
I think so. I mean, well, yeah, they're sour, but I think that they're happy with
for the
coach
future. Correct.
that they have in place. And I think that now there's real question out in L.A. is this exactly what we bargained for and what we thought we were getting when we brought him in? So I think it's a big year 3 for Lincoln. I really think, not to dive too much in the past, but I mean, Bob Stoops handed him one of his best teams in 2017.
Said, drive it straight. I'm handing it to you.
And if you really take a long, hard look, and we're being honest,
Yeah.
there was regression every year. To the point that when Caleb Williams came in Lincoln's last year against Texas, OU was down 21. And Caleb Williams did just like he did at USC, put on that cape, led them to a win, and they won 10 games that year. But if Caleb Williams wouldn't have put that cape on, it's probably a 6-6, 7-5 football team, very similar to the USC team that he currently has now. So I think that the jury's still out on exactly, who Lincoln Riley is, and for that matter, the jury's still out on exactly who Brent Venables is. But what I love about the direction of the program and why I don't think they're still sour is because the way Brent Venables has recruited. And he fully embraced this new world in the SEC. Being at Clemson, playing in national championships, winning national championships against Alabama, he knows what it takes. Mm-hmm. He knows exactly what kind of roster you've got to be able to put together to win in this league at the highest level, and he didn't shy away from that. He embraced it. He had a lot of work to do because there were a lot of holes in this roster and a lot of players that had gone to the NFL and players that had left, either gone with Lincoln or gone elsewhere. And I thought year one, you saw some of those struggles. Year two, they win 10 games. But what excites me is with the way the roster looks now, they've had 3 straight top 10 recruiting classes, and primarily defensively, front 7 players that flat out they weren't getting under Lincoln Riley. They are getting now under a defensive-minded Brent Venables. You've got to win the line of scrimmage, and you've got to be able to play defense in the SEC if you're going to have a chance to play at the top of the league. And I think finally this roster is starting to look like one that can compete in the SEC.
So how do you evaluate the Sooners and Venables as they enter the SEC? Because, if you come into the SEC and go 9-3, I don't think Oklahoma fans and even Texas fans are going to be happy about that, but this is a different conference. So what is the standard?
And these schedules aren't the same. You can't look at the Texas schedule and the Oklahoma schedule and just say, 1-8-4 might actually be better than a 10-2 on the other side.
Correct.
I mean, Oklahoma, they got the short end of the stick as it relates to favorable schedules. Texas, the benefactor of getting an easier schedule as it looks right now. I think the reality is for a lot of these schools, and you just added Oklahoma, Texas. So the grind of the SEC that was already there only intensifies. We're getting rid of an East-West, which for schools on the East and Georgia, I think has been criticized for having the easier schedules because they get to play those East teams, which aren't as tough year in, year out as the West. That's out the window. And so now I think everybody's schedules intensify. That grind becomes even more real, and especially if and when I believe we get to 9-game conference slates, it's going to be that much more difficult to navigate. I've told Oklahoma fans this, if they win 8 games this year, that's a good season. Yeah. If they win 9, I think it's a great season.
I would agree with that.
And so you're going to have to recalibrate because previously 10-2 years were bad years. Like last year, I don't even know how happy the fan base was last year going 10-2 after they beat Texas. Well, they were going to be in the playoff. They were going to win another 15th Big 12 championship. That didn't happen as Oklahoma State, Kansas, they fell to. But I just think that it's a new world. It's a new reality. Fans are fanatical, and we love them for it. I mean, it's going to be hard for them, I think, to readjust and acclimate to this grind of an SEC schedule and recognize that, what once was 10-2, 11-1, 9-3, 10-2 might be just as good, if not better.
All right, before I let you go, who's your SEC champion?
I mean, how can it not be Georgia? Yeah. I mean, they are just so good. I talked with Carson Beck yesterday. And
are you not impressed by him?
So impressed. And one thing that, of all the people I've spoke to, and whether it's at ESPN, on SEC Network, and up on the stage, or host a national radio show on Sirius XM, of all the different people I've had a chance to talk to here this week, Carson Beck stuck with me and impressed me the most because he asked him a simple question about why he came back. And he talked about being there in Atlanta on that field, looking up at that 27-24. And you could hear it in his words, but visibly he was shaking. He was just so motivated, and you could tell want to get back on the field. They have no holes. The offensive line's great. They added Trevor Etienne. I don't worry about the wide receiver position. I think that defense is going to be really, really good here once again. I don't know how you don't go with Kirby Smart because not only are they the most talented team, after talking with Carson Beck, I kind of think they might be the most motivated team. And a motivated Georgia, that's a scary proposition for everybody.
Dusty, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thanks, Bailey.
We'll have more on the other side of the break. Stick with us. Welcome back to your Media Days Craze. I'm Bailey Burmaster. I am joined now by Travis Brown, who specializes in everything Texas, especially the Aggies, who will be here on deck tomorrow talking. But there's a lot of excitement in the SEC because there's some new rivalries and some old ones being revived, and that one is definitely Texas A&M. For the new people coming, what can they expect to see in this one?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in the state of Texas knows about Texas A&M, Thanksgiving. It was Cowboys games in the mornings and Texas A&M at night. I've been on the beat now for almost a decade, and I haven't seen a Texas A&M football game. So, like, the electric energy is just palpable coming into this game. I think when Texas first announced, or the news got out 3 years ago that Texas was going to be coming into the SEC, A&M fans, most of them were kind of turning their nose because so much of their exodus to the SEC was about kind of getting away from Texas and building their own identity. But the Longhorns and the Aggies coming back together, I think as the game has gotten closer and closer, more Aggie fans are kind of realizing that, hey, this is a game I want to see. This is a matchup that I want to take part in every year, and they get to trash talk on Twitter a little bit more about a game, less than just who's recruiting what player and some minor sports and things like that. So it's going to be a huge game, and I think something that both fan bases are gradually getting more and more excited about.
Before we talk about what Texas A&M looks like right now, I want to go back a little further and talk about when Texas A&M left the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it was still the right choice to leave the Big 12?
Yeah, I do, because there was a certain air about that program as kind of being in the shadow of Texas. When they bolted out, there was an okay football player named Johnny Manziel that kind of helped elevate the brand, elevate the football program. And if you look just simply at the recruiting rankings, they were able to recruit football players a lot better from the state and from the Southeast when they were in the SEC, because that's what they offered. You could stay in the state of Texas. You could, grandma, mom, dad, siblings could come see you multiple times a year, but you were playing Alabama, you were playing Florida, you were playing Georgia, some of these big-time schools in the Southeastern Conference. I think, so I do think it's a good move. I think they have finally kind of established themselves in the conference to where they do actually have some rivalry games, and you can see the fan base has moved a little bit further towards wanting to know what the score of the Alabama game was, wanting to know what the score of the Florida game was, instead of kind of still looking back and saying, well, what did Texas do? What did Texas Tech do? What did TCU do? Some of these schools that they had history with. So it's been a good move, and I think that having that a little bit more of an established footprint in the SEC, it gives them a little bit of a leg up as these new teams come in.
Well, and that was my next question. Do you feel like that footprint is strong enough now with Texas coming in? And you leave because you don't want to be a part of that footprint, but now here they are too, along with Oklahoma.
It's an interesting situation when you look at facilities, money, just the kind of the overall strength of the athletic department. Very much so. Texas and A&M have been battling in years past for the richest athletic department in the country. And when you're coming into this new reality of college football and college sports, where there's the house settlement, revenue sharing is probably going to be on its way, NIL, things like that, where money talks, they're a program that this move to the SEC has built that up, and they can compete at that level. And most people would say that more money, more NIL, more facilities is going to lead to wins and being a more stable program. So in that terms, yes. Now, the guy that was supposed to kind of continue to usher them in and all this was Jimbo Fisher, and that didn't go the way that they wanted it to go. He, of course, is living that parachute life, golden parachute life right now with that $77 million buyout. So I think they would have liked to have seen him build something, continue off that 2022 recruiting class that was number one in the nation, and be having a lot of momentum going into Texas and OU coming into the league. But they had to fire Jimbo Fisher, like we said. They brought in Mike Elko. There's been some portal moves. They certainly didn't go back to square one, but they did take a couple of steps back, and Texas is coming in off of a college football playoff appearance. They have probably the quarterback in college football right now. And Quinn Ewers, I mean, all anybody wants to talk about is college football 25, the video game, and he's right there on the cover.
Yeah.
So they certainly, as far as on the field momentum, Texas is coming in with more of that than A&M. But as far as the off the field things, they're right neck and neck and a lead in the conference.
You brought up Johnny Manziel. You cannot talk about the Aggies without bringing up Johnny. What is the perception in College Station of Johnny football these days?
Sure. He is beloved by just about everybody down there. I think there were some times where people were wishing him well to get back to healthier ways of living. But, there was huge fanfare. There was that documentary that came out on Netflix last year with Johnny Manziel.
Which is why I had to ask, because I feel like he disappeared a little bit.
Sure.
Then you see this documentary, and I really appreciated his transparency. I thought he was very honest. It's actually funny. Cliff Kingsbury is in that, talking about the time he had to rip him out of his dorm, and he came to walk through and was just oozing booze out of his pores. I'd heard that story before that. And I was like watching this, and I was like, oh my God, is Cliff going to tell this story? Is Cliff going to tell the story? And sure enough, he did. I appreciated his transparency, but the ending felt flat. There was no real resolution yet.
Right.
And it sounded like he was still finding his way.
And it does seem like that is still the case now. He makes his appearances every now and then in College Station and is greeted with a fanfare by the fan base. But I think there is still some left to be seen, because I think it's just recently, really, that documentary was kind of that point where it seemed like, okay, I think his football dreams and aspirations are over. He's moving on to that next chapter. And I don't know if he or the fan base really knows what that next chapter is. So it was interesting to kind of, like you said, all the stories that we've heard, on background or off the record kind of came out during that. And you can kind of say, yeah, okay, we knew that was going on, but you're saying it out loud. It'll just be interesting to see what his next steps are. And, he opened a bar in College Station, or has a naming rights association in College Station. Don't know if something like that is down the line for him or not, but it'll be interesting to see what that next chapter is.
I covered the Browns for a little bit, and when he, they asked him, how much tape did you watch? And it pans over him, he goes, 0. And I was like, that's actually insane. There's, trying hard, and then you actually have to try hard not to do that.
Right, and just to do the basic things to kind of be a quarterback. It finally got to that point where his natural ability wasn't good enough just to roll out there and play football when he got to the NFL, and he just wasn't able to put in the work.
Any good Johnny football stories you can share?
So I wasn't on the beat when Johnny Manziel was there. I was covering TCU, but
Gary Patterson era?
Gary Patterson era, yes, at that time.
You probably have good stories from Care Bear.
I have good stories from Gary Patterson as well, and some of the quarterbacks up there that were kind of in a similar situation. But,
is that Kenny?
Not Kenny. Kenny was after. So you had Trayvon Boykin, Casey Paha before that.
Oh man.
The infamous Alamo Bowl game where Boykin got in a little legal trouble, but the night before the game, Bram Kohlhausen had to come in and lead the team to victory over Oregon, and kind of became a legend for one game.
That one singular game. Didn't mean to go off the rails.
No.
We'll get back to Texas A&M. What are we going to expect from Mike Elko?
A lot. Running a tighter ship than Jimbo Fisher. A lot more discipline, a lot more attention to detail, as we've kind of started to see so far. The best example I can give of that is during spring practice. They actually had a PA system on the practice fields, and what they said the purpose of this first spring practice was to make sure that the players knew where the kind of tipping point of energy and effort was, and to push their bodies just a little bit further, so they get used to giving that little bit more on every play. And if they deemed that through the GPS, heart rate technology, or just visually seeing a player that he wasn't giving that much effort, they would call the player's name out on the PA system and yell effort. And so it was a shout out to the whole team that, hey, this guy isn't going hard enough, get on him. get him to go further, and for him to personally kind of get that embarrassment and push forward. And that's not something we ever – I mean, don't get me wrong. We saw plenty of coaches getting after players under Jimbo Fisher, but that was just one of those little attention to detail things that stood out so far in the Mike Elko era.
What do you make of this decent defense? It seems like they still have some solid pieces.
Yeah, sure. They bring back a really strong defensive line, and then even though they lost Walter Nolan to Ole Miss, who was kind of the crown jewel of that 2020 class, they go out and get Nick Scorton, who is the Big Ten's sack leader at Purdue. He's a Bryan native. Really cool story. Went down the street to Bryan High School, was a small guy. When I interviewed him as a high school kid, he was wearing like a cowboy hat and a belt buckle before he was going to go off to Purdue. Just kind of your classic little kind of country boy. And then goes up to Purdue. And Mike Elko and his staff, when he was a defensive coordinator there, said, we like the story, we like that you're close to home, but I don't think you're going to fill out and kind of become the monster defensive lineman that we have here at A&M. He goes off to Purdue, puts on weight, kind of gets a swagger about him, loses the cowboy hat and the belt buckle, comes back, gets in the transfer portal, and kind of says, I don't want to talk to A&M because they didn't believe in me when I was coming out of high school just right down the street. Elko went up, made a great pitch, a presentation to him, and he comes back down, kind of looks at things and says, you know what, this is the spot for me. I appreciate that you apologize, that you didn't kind of believe in me at that point, and he might be the absolute crown jewel of this defense moving forward as a transfer coming in, and will have the support of the entire community because he's from literally 5 minutes up the road.
That's amazing. That's such a good story. On the other side of the ball, what are you paying attention to on offense? It seems like they might need to find that super solidified running back.
Yeah, they have some guys back there. Reuben Owens is a former 5-star that could step in. They have Amari Daniels, who got some carries last year. They'll have a little bit of running back by committee, but whether it's the running backs, quarterback Connor Wigman, anything, I think that this season boils down to how well the offensive line can develop this year. That was their biggest problem last year. It led to Connor Wigman getting hurt in the fourth game, breaking his leg, being done for the year. He had struggled getting protection. This season's going to go as the offensive line does. It was the case last year, and it didn't go well. This year, can they solidify? Can they improve? They brought in one or two pieces from the transfer portal, but it's really going to be about a lot of the guys who had been around stepping up, and Coach Cushing, the new offensive line coach, what he can do to kind of turn this thing around, because they got to keep Connor Wigman healthy, and they got to open up some better running lanes for some of these running backs who have some experience but not quite as much. That's going to be the key to the whole thing on offense.
When I look at Texas A&M's schedule, I'll just rattle these games off real quick. Notre Dame, McNeese, at Florida, Bowling Green, Arkansas, Mizzou, at Mississippi State, LSU, at South Carolina, New Mexico, at Auburn, Texas. It's a fair schedule. It's not the hardest schedule. There's a few teams, I think Florida's one of them, Georgia's one of them, that have just brutal SEC schedules. I feel like this is a fair schedule and kind of sets them up to, the world being their oyster if they can produce on the field. What do you make of their schedule?
Yeah, and the most important part of that is probably the four toughest games you would say would be Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, Texas, all in Kyle Field this year. I think before Jimbo Fisher was let go, everybody was kind of pointing to this season, kind of looking at where the schedule lined up and saying, this could be the season with that 2022 class being juniors, Connor Wigman getting a few years under their belt, everything momentum going that way, that this could be the season that big things could happen. They took a step back with Connor Wigman getting hurt, with firing Jimbo Fisher, some of those 2022 guys transferring out, but the schedule lines up well for a first-year head coach at A&M, for the new staff bringing in a philosophy, because I think there is – I look at every game and I see a possibility of A&M being able to win any of those games on the schedule. Now, there's going to be some tough ones. I think Notre Dame right from the start is going to be tough, and Texas at the end of the year is going to be really tough. But there is a pathway in every one of those games that I could see A&M could pull off a win.
What is your expectation? What will this team finish?
Oh gosh, I haven't filled out my my SEC official thing in there yet. But I think if this was the team that they had last year with a little bit improved offensive line, this could be a team that's competing for an SEC title. I think that there's going to be a hiccup or two in there just for the sheer fact that it's a first-year head coach. Players are trying to learn things. So I could see them going 5th or 6th, winning 7 or 8 games, a couple of slip-ups there. But I think the ceiling is as high as they could maybe win 10 if they really mesh and gel together, and that could be putting them in contention for a 12-team playoff. But I would be surprised if they're a playoff team in year 1 under Mike Elko.
You spent time covering the Big 12. You're here at SEC Media Days.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of the comparison?
Oh, gosh.
What's different?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, Big 12 Media Days were held here in this exact hotel for so many years. The frenzy, the chaoticness of SEC Media Days is just on another level. There's so many more media members. There's so many more cameras. And everybody's fighting and jockeying for that question. It's just a little bit more competitive. I liked Big 12 Media Days because we kind of joked and sorry to be making a joke of them, but, when they at Big 12 in the afternoons always had all the players and coaches where you could just go up and have kind of a one-on-one if you get them. And there was always like the Iowa State or the Kansas players that were just kind of sitting there on their phones because and you could go and have a conversation, get some in-depth stuff with it. That does not happen at SEC Media Days when there is 6 or 7 people deep on every player's table to talk with them and everything like that. So it is a circus unlike anything else you'll ever see here, and I'm glad they were able to bring it here to this hotel. It's a great place in Dallas. I'm going to advocate for my hometown to be mostly because it's only a 3-hour drive for me, and I know everywhere to eat. So we'll just stick with that.
You're a writer at heart. You've been here. You've seen the storylines. What have been some of your favorite storylines this week? I know we're wrapping up day 3 essentially, or in the thick of it. But what have you enjoyed so far?
Sure. I mean, it was obvious from the get-go, from Greg Sankey's opening statements, that the reason that this is in Dallas, the reason that the line that they're going to push, it's on all the podiums up here, is now 16 strong. It's about welcoming Texas and OU into the fold and kind of where this conference goes in the future. There's so many things going on, from the House case to revenue sharing to NIL to all of these off-the-field things that are just going to mold and shape how college football goes forward. And yet, and Greg Sankey touched on all those things a little bit, but it always kind of pivoted back towards, but the SEC is stronger, and it's going to be stronger moving forward because Texas and OU are in the conference. That's the thing that really caught my attention, is I thought, especially with how spring meetings went this spring, how everything is going, that this would be this media days would be inundated with questions about revenue sharing, NIL, the future of roster limits, the revenue sharing salary cap. But everything is kind of turned back to Texas and OU and what that does for the conference. Case in point, someone asked Greg Sankey about what there were some of the biggest issues that players had brought to him, and he kind of pivoted that back to the fact that Henry Coleman, an A&M basketball player, had mentioned that, asked when was Texas coming in the conference a couple of years ago, and he said, why? Is it because you want to play them or you don't want to play them? He said, I want to play them as soon as possible. And that was the answer to some of the biggest issues that athletes are dealing right now. Everything was going back towards Texas and OU coming in the conference.
Can I say a win for the SEC was something we had SEC coordinator of officials, John McDade, on. And I was like, listen, we could have a conversation about the new rules and things to take in part of, but I just want to talk to you about what I want to talk about, which is this a penalty?
I was thinking about doing it, but it would get, blasted all over my Twitter, so I'm glad you did it.
I wanted to know, and we ran through scenarios, because essentially it's not going to be called unless it's taunting. So I was like, Carson Beck, rushes in a 5-yard touchdown. As he comes in, drops the ball, little horns down, keeps it moving. He goes, yeah, probably not. It's not disrupting the game. I said, okay. He does the same thing, goes in a UT player's face and is like this. He's like, yeah, that's taunting. We're going to throw the flag. And I was like, okay. I love that, because when it came in the Big 12, you'll know this is a guy who's in the Big 12, everyone was like, this is so soft. What are we doing? And I was curious if it was going to carry over. It seems that it wasn't, and I think the players also agree that if you can't have a little fun, everyone has a hand signal, everyone's always doing stuff. If you can't have some fun with it, what are we doing?
Yeah, I think it's funny from an A&M perspective. Someone was asking what was what's that like in the A&M realm, because they have their own traditions and everything. And I think
It's a little culty.
Well, yeah,
I'll be honest.
Yes,
it's a little culty.
But there's a generational divide. If you're probably 40 or older and the camera pans on you at Kyle Field, you're gonna give the Gig'em thumbs up. But if you're under 25, you're throwing the horns down up all the time in the stands. And so I think that was very interesting. The best part about talking with John McDade, which we did kind of over to the side over here later, is that he's been asked that question
so many times
that he kind of like, when we asked, he kind of went into like a trance-like state and just kind of recited this answer that, he said like 18,000 times.
Well, he's a Harvard grad. I'm hoping we were actually one of the first people to talk to him. I want to be the first person that asked him. Did we talk to him on Monday, John McDade? We talked to him Monday, right, at like 10 o'clock? So we had to be one of the first people, and so I just got it out of the way. I prepped him for that. I'll take credit. No, I'm kidding. But it's been interesting to see how the worlds merge and how OU and Texas gets ready. I think all eyes will be on them. I think about the Red River rivalry a lot, too. Do you think that would be amped up? That's going to be amped up a little even more now that it's in the SEC and not so much the Big 12?
I think so. And, from me being a Dallas native, that was always the big game, not as much Texas and Texas A&M. You always looked forward to that one as everybody coming into town that week. I think it will be amped up. I'm glad they're kind of looking at extending stuff at the Cotton Bowl there for that. And it'll be fun to see both of those rivalry games in the SEC now and kind of how that just ratchets everything up.
All right. Well, Travis, thank you for joining us. We're going to take a short break, and we'll have more on the other side. Stick with us. Welcome back into your Media Days Craze. I'm Bailey Burmaster, and I'm joined now by Kaylee Manziel, who's going to help me finish this one out. How you doing today?
I hope you saved the best for last.
Listen, we always do, don't we? We always do. We're going to talk a lot about the dogs. Let's just get into it. The more I talk to people, whether it's on Radio Row, in passing, coming into this week, the question is Carson Beck the best quarterback in college football right now?
I mean, I think it's a fair argument. Quinn Ewers would be up there too, but I think to see how quickly Carson's progressed as a quarterback, because people still weren't certain about him even midway through the season. He really didn't come alive until that Florida game. So seeing what he accomplished from midway to the season through the end of the season, I can't even imagine the progress that he's made over the last year.
And I love that you said that, because for me, when I came into Atlanta and watching Carson Beck, I was really, I don't want to say I was like a negative Nancy towards him. Let's see. I want a sample size.
Right.
And I think I really started to become a believer in the Auburn game.
Yeah.
He just showed a lot of, the words I've been using all week is composure. And the more you see him, even here in SEC media, just how he handles media, how he goes about his business, he's very here. Now, that's great to be, keeled, as long as when you get on the field and it comes to that moment where you have to drive the team down to win the game, you can do it. And I feel like he really did start to prove that he could do that down the stretch. Where do you think his game goes this season?
I mean, I don't know many quarterbacks who are worse off in the second year than the first year, but what you were saying, I think the best way to describe Carson Beck is he's a silent killer. Kirby Smart will tell you. The guys in the locker room will tell you he's not the most vocal guy. He leads by example. And in a world now where you have everything that everyone's saying about you at your fingertips, you can go on social media, you can go look at any website and read what people are saying about you. The fact that he has this quiet confidence and is able to quiet the noise on the outside, I think that helps with that quarterback mentality, and that's exactly where we want him going into this season. The expectation is so high. I think the only person that can beat out Carson Beck is himself.
I think that's very fair. But he doesn't seem like a guy that gets rattled.
No, and, we actually went back and listened to his press conference, and similar to what you asked, like, where did things change for you last season? And he mentioned that it was the Auburn game.
He
that
did?
First game on the road, and being in that atmosphere and seeing how away crowds really do have an impact on the game. He was like, that's where I really had to grow up as a quarterback, and obviously coming into this season, he knows what to expect out of those games, and I just think the opportunities for him are limitless. He just got a tattoo. I know it's hard to spot because he's got many, but
I was about to say, he's got a lot of tattoos.
It says the sky is the limit, and he said he got it because he wants this concept of never-ending progression, that he can always get better, and it always can be better for him.
We will see how it fares. It's obviously going to look a little different on offense with Ladd gone, Brock gone. Who do you potentially see stepping up? I know a lot of people have been throwing Oscar Delp out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest questions surrounding this Georgia team is when you don't have Brock and when you don't have Ladd, who steps up and becomes the go-to guy when things go wrong? I think it could be one of two people. I think it could be Trevor Etienne. We've heard so much buzz about him in the offseason. I know Florida fans were really sad to see him gone. And you almost think of Georgia in the past as RBU, but it really hasn't been that way the past couple of years. There hasn't been a standout guy like that. So I think that having Trevor Etienne in that position is going to help out Carson a lot, not having to use his legs as much. But I think in the wide receiver position, when you look at this group on paper, there's not one elite guy that jumps off the page and you're like, yeah, that's the guy. It's a bunch of really good guys. But for me, my guess is going to be Dylan Bell, somebody that's been with Carson from the beginning. We saw a glimpse of what he could do during the Tennessee game last year, and just the impressive plays that he made. I know how close he is with Carson off the field too, so I think that's going to become the guy that Carson goes to when it's like, we got to make sure that this happens.
What do you make on the defensive side of the ball? We can talk about Malachi Starks and Mike Hell, but what do you make of the corner position?
Oh, see, that's the thing is everybody keeps talking about how that might be the weak spot, and that's where the questions arise, because when you think about the great Georgia teams of the past, especially that first-year national championship team, it's been all about the defense, the Georgia defenses, and this is the first year that it's really been an offensive-minded team. But I do think there's a lot of options. There's a lot of good guys in the sophomore group, and the one that really comes to mind that I think is going to be a standout player for us is going to be Ellis Robinson, who's going to be a true freshman this year. He's obviously probably the most talked about recruit of the class, but I think that we're going to see some of the younger guys shine in the corner position. But I'm hoping that some of the veterans that we have in the safety position and the linebacker position will help make up for the questions that we have surrounding the corner. But Glenn Schumann is one of the absolute best defensive-minded coaches in the league, and I know that he's going to have that question answered before the season starts.
What do you make of the expectations for Michael this season?
Oh, I'm so excited to see him in that jack position. Yes.
Yep.
And just his versatility. I mean, he's a big guy who makes a big impact, and you know, he told us at the end of the season after the Orange Bowl last year that he was not impressed with his entire season as a whole. And it's like you look at him and you're like, really? Because nobody else is thinking that. And so I'm excited to see the progression that he's made this year and excited to see the impact that he makes in that jack position.
You can't talk about Georgia right now without talking about some of their off-field issues with the driving, speeding, tickets. Were you satisfied with Kirby's responses yesterday to those questions?
I'm just glad that we got an answer out of him. I always say that he would make the greatest politician because he's really good at giving you absolutely nothing. But to know that there is something being done on the administrative side, whether that be the fines that they're imposing through the Classic City Collective, and also we found out about 10 minutes before Kirby took the stand that they had let go of David Daniels' ban for violating team rules. We can only assume that, you know, it was a driving-related incident. That was the question, is we don't know in the media what goes on behind the scenes, or if there was a punishment being imposed in general. So the fact that we got that out of him, I hope it slows it down, because I hate that we had to spend so much time talking about the things
we don't want to talk about it.
No, I want to know what's happening on the field. I don't want to have to continue to talk about what's going on off the field. I'm glad that you brought it up, because it obviously needs to be addressed.
You got to point it out. It's one of those things, even when you're talking to Kirby about it, you're like, I don't even want to ask you this, but I can't not do my job. We can't turn the blind eye. And I think, you know, to be fair to Kirby doesn't come across as the guy that's just going to let it roll off to the sideway. I don't think that's been the case. I think he's trying to handle it, but for some reason it's not going through the kids. And I think he's right at the end of the day with his players. Their voices are going to be so much more heard from them saying something. And I think Carson was even asked about his Lambo, and he was like, yeah, well, I just don't drive it like a crazy person, essentially.
Well, I think a lot of the problem, too, is you can maybe expect that out of the young kids. You're freshly 18 years old. You've got a fast car. You've got lots of money. I think the one that we were the most surprised to hear about was Smile Munden, who's supposed to be a leader on the field and a leader in the locker room. So to hear him being arrested for a driving-related incident, it's like, if your veterans aren't following the rules, why are you expecting the young guys to do it? So I'm hoping that whatever punishment they're putting into play now will change the game. And I'm also hoping that once football season starts, their priorities are going to be back on the season, and the distractions from the outside will be minimized.
We'll talk about the overall skew of schedules in the SEC this season in a second, but I want to look at Georgia's. So they opened. This is the thing that's been blowing my mind all week. They could play in Atlanta at the Benz 4 times if they make it to the national championship game. I asked Mike Hell what that would mean. He's like, I love the Benz. It's awesome to be in Atlanta, to make this home and be able to do that. So if we can do that, like, let's do it.
It's refreshing to hear you say that and to hear Mike Hell say that, because you would think of Mercedes-Benz as almost the second home to Georgia. It's right in their own backyard, but when you look at the timeline of Alabama and Georgia and the history of their matchups in Mercedes-Benz,
it's not good.
No,
it's
Georgia has not had that much success. It's like this psychological hump that they have to get over. So I'm hoping that with the Clemson in Game 1, they'll be able to go ahead and get over that hump immediately.
No, absolutely. And some of these games, I mean, their schedule is brutal. I think people overlook it for the mere fact that it's Georgia, so they can handle anything. But they're at Kentucky, at Alabama, Auburn, at Texas, Florida, at Ole Miss, obviously ran out with Georgia Tech. But, I mean, the one everyone has circled is in Austin on October 19th. It's going to be insane. I was telling someone earlier, I mean, I think our hotels were like over $2,000.
Yeah.
Flights are insane. It's also the same weekend of Formula One at Circuits of America.
And there's a big Major League Soccer game in Austin that weekend, too. So it's just like the list just keeps growing.
With Austin FC. So there's just a lot going on. Which game are you looking forward to most on the schedule?
Everybody wants you to say Texas, right? It on paper might be the biggest road game that Georgia's had in the last decade. But for me, I'm excited to go to Ole Miss.
I don't think that's a bad answer.
I have never been to the Grove before. I've only heard myth and legend. But I do know that when Trey Harris spoke to the media on the first day of SEC Media Days, he talked about the impact that Sanford Stadium had on the outcome of the Ole Miss Georgia game, and he said that he was excited for Oxford to return the favor. So I'm excited to see how Ole Miss brings it and just be in that environment. And then, of course, Alabama as well. I've never been to Tuscaloosa and Bryant-Denny Stadium. I know. The road schedule.
I haven't been for a football game, but I've been separately, and even then it was like, okay, this is a whole nother level.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear Dixieland Delight in person. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that, but I'm probably
we'll keep that secret. We'll keep that secret. We won't tell anyone.
Yeah, don't narc on me right here. I could get in trouble for that. But, I mean, just the strength of schedule in terms of away games. On paper, it's like, oh my gosh. But then again, if Georgia does make it to the SEC championship and potentially the playoff and potentially the national championship, you know that they're going to be battle tested because they've done everything that they've had to do, especially in those away game environments.
Let's talk about another Georgia connection. Brock Vandergriff has made his way to Kentucky. What are the expectations for him with the Wildcats? Do you think they're getting something bigger out of him than they really recognize?
I think because Texas and Oklahoma have come into the SEC, it's kind of taken away from some of the other teams that we would usually spend more time talking about. I don't think that the people in this room are talking about Brock Vandergriff enough. We talked a little bit before this. He was so beloved by not just the team, but also the Athens community because he was the hometown kid. He led his high school to a state championship. This is a kid who knows the feeling of winning and knows what it takes to lead a team to a championship. He brings so much, not just in the passing game, but also on the ground. So you don't look at Brock Vandergriff and think, yeah, that kid's shifty and can and move around, but I think that Kentucky is going to be pleasantly surprised with what Brock Vandergriff brings to the table.
Well, not even just Brock Vandergriff, but I feel like Kentucky has been slept on this entire SEC Media Days. Now, I know they get to the podium and whatnot tomorrow, but no one's talking about them. I feel like people are even talking about Vanderbilt and Mississippi State just a little bit more, which is like, they ain't got a whole lot going on. Let's not overlook Kentucky. And I just, maybe it sets them up for a little bit of recipe for success, given that everyone's just going to overlook them.
Well, I think a lot of that stems from the fact that there's no SEC East and no SEC West anymore, because if we're talking about SEC East, Kentucky's one of those teams that consistently falls second, third, or fourth. But now that they're combined, I feel like Kentucky is one of those teams that kind of gets lost in the middle, and it's going to be up to them to get over that hump into the next tier so that they can be entered back into the conversation.
Absolutely. We were talking about schedules earlier, and I want to dive into that because this, first of all, you have the 12-team playoff.
Woohoo.
Are you a fan? I've been asking everyone today. Are you a fan?
It means what? An extra 3 weeks of college football? Count me in.
Yep. It elongates the season. They'll have to handle things differently. But what's interesting is you're probably going to get 4 teams from the SEC that go in. But the records, so let's say you go 9-3. To some of these powerhouse programs, that's not going to look like, that's not going to be good enough.
Right. Well,
but it might be very good depending on your schedule.
Yeah, I definitely am interested to see how the committee goes about picking the other 8 teams, the ones that don't get a bye, because there was so much controversy surrounding the college football playoff selection last year with Florida State not getting in, then putting Alabama. They were already under so much pressure, and now you've got the 4 out of 5 power conference champions, and then you've got to pick the other 8. So how much does that record come into play? Do you go with a 2-loss team that maybe their strength of schedule just isn't nearly as good as an SEC team with 3 losses? I really think that this first year of the 12-team playoff is going to have to set the precedent for what it's going to look like in future years.
Yep, and we all remember what happened last year with Florida State. I think they're trying to avoid something like that. I do think the 12-team will cause a little chaos, and that might be a little bit nice and fun for the sport. But let's run through every team's schedule real quick. I want you to give me the games that you like. We'll start with Texas A&M. They open against Notre Dame.
I mean, you've got it highlighted right
I
there.
do. I have highlights of the games I think it is, but, open against Notre Dame is not easy for first-year Mike Elko.
No, absolutely not. I'm very interested to see what Mike Elko does, because even though he's a first-year coach, coming off that stretch with Jimbo Fisher, how much they paid him and how much they're still having to pay him, there's going to be pressure on Mike Elko to do some good work with Texas A&M, considering that fan base is just so passionate. I feel like You don't necessarily have to win that first game against Notre Dame, but it needs to be competitive. It needs to be close, and it needs to show promise for the Aggies for them to rally behind Mike Elko's cause.
Absolutely. Mark Stoops, year 12 for him. They will face Georgia. They go to at Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Texas, and then Louisville to end it out. I think that I'm going to say that Kentucky at Ole Miss right now is a trap game.
I think so, too. I feel like when you look at their schedule, let's see, you've got Georgia there, you've got Ole Miss there. There's a game that you maybe aren't favored to win, and if you're Kentucky, you need to win one of those games, and it's at Ole Miss. That makes it a little bit tougher. Who else we got there? I think that Kentucky-Tennessee game is another one that could potentially be a big one for them, a familiar rival that they haven't had much success against in the past, so maybe if he can get over that hump with Tennessee, it'll show a lot of promise for the Wildcats.
So then you have Auburn in year 2 of Hugh Freeze, and, I mean, their non-con is average. Obviously, they play California, but they have
redeemed themselves right there from last year,
don't they? And I'll say this: Oklahoma and then at Georgia back to back. That's a little bit of a gauntlet, mid-season, early gauntlet right there.
Yeah, they're also Georgia's homecoming game, which is something that we've been talking about this year. But I mean, I feel like that game at Oklahoma.
Do you feel like that's a trap game?
I feel like that game at Oklahoma is going to say a lot, too, because so much of the conversation between Texas and Oklahoma has been about Texas and maybe less about Oklahoma. And it's like, how can you really compare Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC when they haven't faced the same level of competition?
Yeah.
So I really think we're going to be able to make the comparison between the two programs coming in versus a team like Auburn, who kind of falls in that middle ground in the SEC.
We won't spend too much time in Arkansas. I'll point at the one that I like. Obviously, I'm biased for Oklahoma State, but they are at Oklahoma State, and I think that is going to be a point for the Big 12 to try and win that game for the mere fact of, look, you took OU Texas, and here you are playing Arkansas, and the Big 12 can get one. I think they'll push that. Texas, I think we already discussed. I think Oklahoma, and then having to play Georgia.
At Michigan on September 7th.
Right? That's going to be a tall task for Steve Sarkisian. We're going to skip Mississippi State because we're running out of time. Same with Florida because, their Billy Napier's is a little bit on the hot seat.
I'll make this quick. My
bold
prediction all season long is I think that when they face off with Georgia, Billy Napier will not be the head coach of the Florida Gators.
Okay, I want to check back in with you on that. Josh Heupel doing great things at Tennessee. He goes back to Oklahoma after spending time. I'm excited to see that. Oklahoma has a wave of a schedule as well. What are your favorite Georgia games, though, before we get out of here?
You got to win game 1. You got to win that second SEC matchup at Alabama. I mean, everybody's excited for Texas. I'm excited for Texas, but I'm excited to have Kalen DeBoer face off with Kirby Smart and Georgia Bulldogs in his first ever SEC game.
Week 5. Yeah. First ever. He's going to have chills.
And Georgia and Alabama both have a bye week before that game, so that's a lot of time to prepare.
Too much time to think about it.
Hype. Yes, and I'm curious to see what Kalen DeBoer is going to do in his first SEC game.
What is your prediction for the Georgia Bulldogs?
I think that they lose the regular season game at Texas.
Okay.
I think that they rematch with Texas in the Final Four, beat Texas, and go on to win the national championship. That's been my prediction.
I like that. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I like that. All right. Kaylee, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my gosh, thank you so much.
You're rounding out our day 3 of Media Days Craze. Make sure to join us one final time tomorrow for the 4th and final day. We'll have all the latest right here on your Media Days Craze. See you tomorrow.